Let's bring in the pollsters.
That's right. Dustin Olson is from American Pulse Research and Polling and host of the Political Trade Secrets podcast. And James Johnson is from JL Partners. Great to have you this morning.
Great to be here.
Morning.
Well, we'll know what the people have to say when the polls close, but what do the polling have to say with regard to, let's say, New York City? The latest poll showing Andrew Cuomo pulling within range of Zohran Mamdani, who once had a commanding lead in the all-important race for mayor. And here's what happens if Curtis Sliwa suddenly drops out of the race. Too late now, today's election day. But President Trump throwing his support behind Andrew Cuomo. What's your take on this, Dustin?
Yeah, we've actually been pulling this race quite a bit over the last year, and I'm not quite convinced that if Sliwa had gotten out of the race, that it would have made that big of a difference. It would have made a difference for sure. Though, one of the things that's interesting, if you are a New York City voter, the ballot is actually pretty difficult, and Andrew Cuomo is not in the top line, so that's going to have an impact on him by a couple of points. But I do see this race has been closing, and largely I think it has to do in the last few weeks. Mamdani has done some things that really don't make sense to a lot of New Yorkers when he took a picture with the unindicted co-conspirator from the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. These are the kinds of things that for New Yorkers they have a real problem with. And we have done some internal polling where we asked people who had been had lived in the area on 9/11, and there's a big difference. If you were in the city or in the region around there, you are voting for Cuomo in this race. And if we just had regular New York City folks, then that would definitely be a Cuomo victory tomorrow.
Yeah.
To your point, Curtis Sliwa is in column 2, which is B, and Andrew Cuomo, I think we have a sample ballot, if we can pull that up. Andrew Cuomo is on the second row in column E. So that's interesting that it spells out B. To be or not to be? That is the question that will be answered in today's election.
Yeah, and even Eric Adams is on the ballot too, and that could move the needle a percentage point or two. James, I want to get your perspective on this race. We had a pretty big turnout here in New York City. Over 700,000 people voted early. Is there any chance that Cuomo could win tonight?
I think it's over. I think it's time for socialism in New York City. I think, at JL Partners, we had a poll that showed Mamdani on 46%, followed by Cuomo down in the mid-30s. We had Curtis Sliwa on 21%. He has had a strong campaign. I suspect that with Trump's endorsement of Cuomo last night, that will now drop. But I can't see any conclusion here apart from Mamdani winning by double digits. I think Mamdani probably will break 50%. But look, that is a pretty poor performance for a Democrat in a city that is 70% Democrat. And whatever happens, Mamdani is not going to get close to the numbers that Eric Adams did in 2021, and indeed previous Democrats like Bill de Blasio achieved in New York. And that's the climate that he's going to face. He's going to face a New York City that is not rallied around him. And just 2 quick data points to back that up. We asked voters who weren't voting for Mamdani, which now polls a majority of New Yorkers, what they expected the city to be like 4 years after. And the main word that they gave was disaster. And there were some other words that are too rude to repeat on Newsmax too.
Thank you.
And then the second thing is we asked people, would you consider leaving the city? And we had 8% of people, 8% of New Yorkers tell us that they would definitely leave New York if Mamdani was elected. That's the equivalent of 700,000 people. Now, people overplay these things in polls, right? They're probably not actually going to leave, but it does show that a lot of people are at least thinking about going for the door under the possibility of a Mayor Mamdani.
We're going to move on to another race, but for right now, I want people to actually see the ballot that we were actually just talking about with regard to Zohran Mamdani, Democrats, column A, and then followed by Sliwa, the Republican candidate, column B, and then all the way on the second row, shifting over to the right, is in column E, Andrew Cuomo. And as Krisha pointed out, Eric Adams is also still on the ballot. So a lot for voters to actually consider, but hopefully they can navigate and fill out the bubbles accordingly.
Yeah.
But speaking about bubbles, let's shift it over to New Jersey. Governor's race, this heating up. Most polls showing it too close to call. We had Jack Ciattarelli on First Edition yesterday. Here's what he had to say.
Hey, New Jersey, the Democrats have controlled the legislature for 25 years, the executive branch for the last 8 years, and it's been failure after failure after failure when it comes to taxes, spending, public education, public safety, overdevelopment. And so if you want change, you got to make a change. Now's your chance. But we really like our position here.
Exactly. Ciattarelli got an unexpected visit on the campaign trail. His Army captain's son, Jake, surprising him, returning from Kuwait on the eve of the election. How do you see this race against Democrat Mikey Sherrill playing out? Dustin?
Yes, well, I look at this, all these elections happening today, that we are, typically in the off-year elections following a presidential election, the party out of power usually does pretty well. So we should be expecting Democrats to be surging in this blue city and these blue states, and we're not seeing that. And this is the best case. Trump lost the state by around 6 points, and really Democrats want to be winning the state by more than 6 points to have a good omen going into the next year for the midterms. And right now we're just not seeing that. Same thing in Virginia. It could be single digits for whoever wins, and that isn't good for the Democrats going into this next year. So I look at this race as a big change. This is also a state that's changing over time, and I think it's a good thing for Republicans.
Yeah, similar to New York, James, we saw a record turnout here in New Jersey as well, early voting, over 1 million people. What does New Jersey need to see in order for Ciattarelli to win? Because here, this is an incredibly tight race. Many are saying it comes down to the suburban voters, as well as maybe those who are minorities who feel very disaffected from the Democrat Party right now.
Yeah, I mean, those early voter numbers are better for Democrats. There's no doubt they're benefiting from that early registration advantage that they have. But as we know, early voting tends to look a bit more blue anyway. So let's wait and see what happens today. Look, I think this is going to be a tough job for the Republican candidate. I think he's clearly run a good campaign. But as Dustin says there, he is running against headwinds. I find it hard to see how an off year he can beat Trump's performance in the state, because Trump had a lot of voters out for him that don't usually vote in midterms, let alone off-year elections. So I do find it hard to see where he finds the numbers. However, what a lot of people will be looking for, including people at the top of the Republican Party, will be how close can he get? And actually, if he does come close in this race, even if he doesn't win, that is going to be really interesting about the map for next year. And even for 2028, people are going to start thinking, are the New Jerseys, the Minnesotas, the New Mexicos becoming actual swing states now? Or actually, do we revert to our standard view of what the swing states have been for the last few years? So I think New Jersey, this election could matter actually for years to come. If Republicans come close, I think they see a whole new field opening up for them, and some of the more traditional fields perhaps paling in comparison.
But here's an unscientific data point. Many Democrat leaders on the left have actually come out and publicly endorsed Ciattarelli. So that may not be captured in the polls, but hopefully is captured today at the polling station. But let's head to Virginia, where former Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger and Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Earl Sears are both looking to become the Commonwealth's first female governor. Polls show the Democrat ahead as in-person voting begins. How do you see this shaping up, Dustin? Because we have the polls and we have the lack of endorsement from President Trump, probably because he didn't even endorse the current incumbent, Glenn Youngkin. And that turned out very favorable for him. So will we see the same thing again here?
Yeah, so, this is a much different state, and we have the government shutdown going on. I live in Northern Virginia. A lot of people are affected. This is a state that definitely does go against whoever won in the presidential election. 11 of the last 12 contests, it's gone to the party that was outside the White House after the presidential election. So that's what I would expect. However, again, this is another one that if if it's a single-digit race, that's a big loss for Democrats. This is also a race that has a lot to do with what are other political undercurrents going on in the election right now and in the greater political discourse. Political violence as well as redistricting have both been big stories in this race. And Jay Jones, for Attorney General, it's possible he could still win, but that's only because they have such early voting in the state that some people had already voted before that story broke. But this has become a defining issue and has affected everybody on the ticket. And the down ballot races are actually closer than the top of the ballot.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. But Dustin, Olson, James Johnson, thank you for your insights this morning.
Thank you all.